The Matthew Dark Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, praise God. Welcome in. Speaking on Iran war here tonight, and we're moving from kinetic to economic. You could say 6 months in, we should be done. Iran was advertised as having their military destroyed, the Navy at the bottom of the sea, their economy in ruins, and that they've been begging for mercy since March, since April, since May, since June, since July. And here we find ourselves now in August. August the 28th would mark 6 months into the conflict. And you have to ask yourself, if we had started economically, would we be in a better position today? Now, remember, this was the most unpopular war we've probably seen of all time here in America. Go back to 2001, Afghanistan and Iraq, where you had some 75 to 80% of American support rally around the flag, right? We saw the images of the Twin Towers going down, of course, Building 7 falling down, the Pentagon, and again in Pennsylvania. And we really didn't ask a lot of questions at that time. It was go get them. And so you had enormous support. And for several years into that war, you had tremendous support. But this one didn't carry that. If you go back to February 28th, it was advertised as Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. Now, we found out a lot more about their nuclear program. Joe Kent, Tulsi Gabbard, NSA, they didn't have a nuclear weapon. So it was already a tough sell for something that we were not afraid of, not scared of, but that we're going to enter a major conflict with a major country. Remember, 5,000-year-old civilization and 92 million people. All right, so this is a little different story than Iraq or little bitty Afghanistan, not even comparable. So it didn't have the support in the beginning, but of course, Donald Trump was urged to get into this war. And if you remember Marco Rubio, it was because Israel was going to attack, and we wanted to jump in front of that retaliation from Iran. So we bombed them, killed the Ayatollah, killed the schoolgirls, started the conflict, and really didn't anticipate. I don't think they appreciated the leverage that the Strait of Hormuz and the challenges that was going to offer entering this conflict. You know, we killed the Ayatollah, regime change. We're all good. Abe Lincoln was going to ascend to presidency in Iran, maybe George Washington, Teddy Roosevelt. I'm not sure where they got that idea, but what we found is that the civilization, Iran, the nation, it rallied around their roots, their history. They were not going to lay down for the United States. And I'm sure there's many, 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 many Iranians that said, yeah, we'd like probably a better life, better president, but not that way. Not with the United States coming in and decimating, and then we now cede control. 1979, they started sanctions. Of course, that was the Islamic Revolution that took place there. They kick out the Shah, and they've been under pressure ever since, and probably the most sanctioned country in the world. And now we're going to intensify those economic pressures. And you have to step back and ask yourself, why didn't we start there? You know, this is a $2 billion a day war that's causing massive inflation and long-term inflation. You can see the gas problem. Yeah, oil's about $88 to $92, but gas is still way behind, sits up at around $4.27 on a national average. I know I just paid $4.47. Friend of mine paid $4.17. So you're paying gas, Biden level gas. And you remember the outrage against Joe Biden and the inflation, we're right back in there. And that was a sliver in time. That high gas with Joe Biden, and this is no defense, he has got to be the worst president of all time, if it was even him. But that was a short period, about 3 months, where you saw the $5 gas. The difference is this got to $4 really, really quick, and it has a long-term probability of staying up here for some time. So we started kinetically, we started with aggression, and now we're going to say, well, 6 months in, that's not working. And clearly it's not working. As much as we want to support President Trump and his fans are just still holding on for dear life that this is the right thing to do with American assets, American military, American dollars, American worries, he's convinced himself that this is what we must do. And most of his MAGA fans that are still in there are still doing that. But we have less than 30% support for this war. President Trump has seen his approval ratings go down to 33%, disapproval rate of 64%. Okay, these are Biden level numbers. And this is President Trump, the great President Trump. You know, the one, he came down the escalator in Trump Towers and he was going to do two things. He was going to close the border, build a wall, and then drain the swamp. He advertised himself as a no new wars president and how stupid we were to get involved in the Middle East. George Bush was a fool. Obama was a fool. He always threatened or suggested that Obama was going to get us into a world war. Joe Biden was going to get us into a world war. And here we are sitting on a stalemate. 6 months in, there is not an end in sight for this one. There's not a peace agreement that's going to happen. And you could suggest we're further away from a peace deal today than we were on February 28th, March 1st, June 1st, August 1st. We're further away from that. And the leverage in the Strait of Hormuz was not calculated properly. That's a major problem. And so President Trump has been faced with two things, two routes. Go back to the Easter tweet. If you don't open the Strait of Hormuz, we're going to annihilate the civilization of Iran. That's what he said on Easter and used filthy language, all of these things. That's one route. You could leave in shame and say, you know what? This was a mistake. I'm so sorry. We were misled. We were lied to by Israeli intelligence. We were lied to by neocons in our own government, and I'm out. I'm not going to go down with this ship. But see, that's what pride does to a person. It prevents you from acknowledging when you made a mistake, when you messed up, when you stepped in it. And clearly, President Trump has stepped in something that he needs significant help to get out of. So he goes economic pressure now, economic sanctions. And now anybody who's doing business with Iran will feel our wrath. Of course, he was also threatening Oman. Oman, of course, on the other side of the strait, which we've been sending some shipping through, is now being threatened by President Trump that if they interfere or get in the way or disallow any safe passages, he said, and this is his words, we'll bomb the SHIT out of Oman, right? Now, is that just big talk? I think it's a frustrated man. I think it's a scared man. I think it's somebody who's gotten into a situation and they want out so bad. President Trump wants out of this situation so bad. He only has the two choices: destroy them all or say this was a mistake. Pride doesn't let him take that mistake, though. So he's going to go all the way. And what economic sanctions do doesn't prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. The only thing that prevented Iran from having a nuclear weapon was the annihilation of Iran. Economic sanctions, this is a country that's lived since 1979 with economic sanctions. They know how to do business under economic sanctions. It's not as if it was a thriving, bustling Tokyo, New York City prior to February 28th. They were still dealing with enormous selling black label oil back behind the door, bootlegger style. To China and other places in Asia at a discount. And for just a little sliver of time, remember in the MOU, they were actually granted the licensure, the legal standing to sell oil all around the world. That didn't last very long. Okay, so they know how to do business under sanction. They know how to guard their coast. They know how to close the Strait of Hormuz. And we're now in a position, do we continue to spend $2 billion a day, increase oil and energy costs, separate ourselves further and further away from the American people? This is a very unpopular war. Even if you love President Trump, it's getting only a 30% approval from the nation. Okay, so then as you move into midterms and you're going to take that record into November and say, vote for me, we can do better, that's a really tough sell. $4 a gas between now, well, I mean, and this started in March, but between March and November, and you have pressure like that on the American people, when you already had out of control inflation in housing, in food, in energy, in healthcare, all these things were off the charts. We didn't have any room in the budget for $4, $5 gas. And the gas situation could get worse. You understand that there is no mechanism right now that brings gas down to $2.85, $2.75. It was supposed to be $2, if you remember President Trump, as he was getting close to the 2024 campaign and the election. I'm going to bring your gas down to $2. Your energy cost is going to be nothing. We're going to deal with inflation. And unfortunately, when you intervene in the Middle East, and we've discussed this at length, we've never had a success in the Middle East. What you find is inflation creeps up. And then now we've just added that to the stack of piling bills here in America. Nobody can afford to live in America comfortably anymore, except for that little bitty sliver at the top or the very, very bottom that has the government paying for everything anyways. Those are the only two groups surviving, thriving, and really have low stress. Everybody else trying to raise a family, trying to run a business, trying to go to now moms all work full time. right? And we send our school kids to these terrible schools where they preach DEI and they preach LGBTQ and they teach secularism and they denounce God and all these. That's because moms all have to work full time, right? That's a result of poor economic decisions, gluttony of spending from our federal government. Remember, we just cracked $40 trillion in government debt. Think about that for a second. President Trump, in his first term, said he was going to actually eliminate and pay back that debt. We weren't going to have any. And since he's taken his two terms, have added $11 trillion to the national debt. Now, again, he's not the only one. Obama did it. George Bush did it. Joe Biden did it. It's the same character, different costume. There's no difference. And if you ask yourself, well, which economy treated me better? Which economy, under which president did I feel like I had more security? It's not this one. You are living right now, ladies and gentlemen, in the most expensive time in the history of America. And there's no end in sight on that. There's no plan to do that. All we're doing now is just delaying and stretching this out because there's going to be economic sanctions as well as then in continued inflation. Okay, so we have 20% of the world's energy coming through the Strait of Hormuz that has come to a screeching halt. And sanctions don't open up the Strait of Hormuz, only kinetic takeover, bombing, destroying, sending more assets and resources to the Middle East. It's the only way. You just can't have Iran on the planet anymore. It can't be on the globe anymore and have an open Strait of Hormuz. One has to give. You want it open, you got to destroy them all. You want it closed, keep playing these games, or walk away. But see, they can't walk away because Iran's already won this war. 6 months in, they weren't supposed to survive 6 months. We were told on day one, well, we were told last year that in July, the big B-52s, they went down 30,000 feet into the ground and destroyed the bunkers. Okay, they didn't have a nuclear program after that. Tulsi Gabbard, Joe Kent confirmed they don't have a nuclear weapon. I don't know where you're getting that from. They advised the president there is no nuclear threat at the moment. And they have to maintain ambitions of nuclear because if you don't have nuclear and the U.S. has put a target on your back, you're toast. So you have to have leverage against the United States because it's a war machine. Remember, a $1.5 trillion military budget is what President Trump is asking for next year's budget. Okay, that's a war machine. 1.5 trillion. We've talked at length on this show. What couldn't you fix in the world, in the country for 1.5 trillion? You worried about homelessness? That's gone. You worried about mental illness? We got that covered. Drug addiction, a closed border, build a wall. Those are all done. Bridges, airports, roads, water, sanitation. That's all fixed with tons of money left over at 1.5 trillion. And that's every year. That's not a one-time check. The military is going to ask for that each and every year. And they're also going to operate on inflation. They're also going to say, well, cost of living, cost of goods has gone up. So now we're at 1.5, need to go to 1.6 trillion. And it never ends. But we're about to the breaking point. Of course, you saw not the Fed, because this is now kind of going to be an in squabble, because the Federal Reserve, they have two mandates, inflation and maximum employment. And they're actually closer to a rate increase than they are a cut. President Trump has been demanding a rate cut since he took office. He says we're doing so great economically. We're not, but that's what he says because he views the stock market and says, look at how good this is, and says we need a rate cut because we're doing so good. Inflation goes up with cheap money. It goes down when you restrict how much credit and capital goes into the market. So the Federal Reserve had 3 members actually vote at their last meeting for a rate increase. And of course, Trump's placed his guy in there and he can't cut rates. You just can't do it. So Secretary Bessent, homosexual man, by the way, Scott Bessent, is going to now double up what the U.S. is going to buy in treasuries. So they're going to double that up to try and deal with inflation, to try and deal with interest rates. And that's not going to work either because that's also printed money that they're using to artificially suppress interest rates. But you could see the market responded. It didn't have the impact. I mean, the market is exhausted up here. It's stuck up here. They've been begging for a rate cut, not going to get it. And now we have to deal with the reality of you have an economy that's suffocating in debt. You have wages that cannot keep up with this rate of inflation, food, energy, housing, healthcare, can't keep up. The spending is out of control, 40 trillion in debt we just discussed. There's no end in that. And so you've basically run smack into a brick wall that there's really nowhere to get out of. So President Trump is now faced with the terribly difficult decision: push further into the war or peel back and just call it an economic sanction game. And let's face it, I wonder, had we started with the economic sanctions, let's just pretend Iran actually had a nuclear weapon and we felt scared. You could have done this to start the war. You could have gone to them and say, tear it down, shut it down, and here's what we're going to do until you can prove you've dismantled and given up all those ambitions. And anybody that does business with Iran, we're going to punish you tenfold. Nobody get in our way of this. We're going to deal with this country once and for all. Economically, that doesn't cost $2 billion a day like war does. That does not cause a jump in energy like war does, right? You can do economic sanctions on Iran and you don't have to worry about inflation. You don't have to worry about depleting your military resources. One of the reasons he's going to have to pull back for the time being is that we don't have the ammunition, we don't have the ships, we don't have the ability to fight the Ukraine war in Russia and defend Israel and attack Iran. And you still have to have leftover because you have other aggressive countries in the world. China, they want Taiwan. Russia could start obliterating places like Poland, NATO countries, for what they've done to them, and you're out of the game. You're locked out. You already blew your load on Israel, Iran, and Ukraine, all lost causes. Okay, you could give missiles and bombs and technology to Ukraine until the world blows up. They can't beat Russia. Okay, you don't have enough resources to defend Israel in every instigative thing they go and do in the Middle East. Now, of course, they're still in Lebanon. And I always ask our American Christians, they are killing Christians in Lebanon. You do understand those are your brethren, even though I know you love the Jewish nation. They are killing Christians in Lebanon, and it doesn't seem to bother you. So I don't think you've read your Bible. I don't think you understand what Acts talks about, Jesus talks about. I don't think you've ever heard of the Talmud, which describes Jesus Christ boiling in hell, covered in feces, and that his mother was a whore. That's modern day Judaism and how they feel about our Lord Jesus Christ. So how do you accept that? Well, you can't. You can't accept the death of schoolgirls. That had nothing to do with this conflict. You thought killing the Ayatollah was going to let us waltz in and take whatever we wanted, kind of like Venezuela. And then you misunderstood this is 92 million with a sophisticated military, with a geographical strategic location that's going to cause problems. And especially for all our fake friends in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, UAB, Bahrain, all these countries are sitting ducks and they are in sights for Iran. And all this was because Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, right? But look at what we're paying to prevent that. And of course, we just reported as well, Trump said he doesn't care. He'll never apologize for getting into this war. And I think at some point we have to say, well, what is in it for us? I ask again, how many of you have ever lost a night of sleep thinking Iran was getting a nuclear weapon, and as soon as they get it, me, my wife, my grandchildren, we're all dead? That's an irrational thought that they beat into your mind over and over and over, a lot like the line of Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terror. You've heard all these slogans over and over. And when you're in fear, especially a fake fear like this, I mean, Iran is going to kill all Americans. They're going to destroy the United States with one nuclear weapon. So they have 0 right now, but if they get 1, we're all toast. Doesn't that sound crazy to you when you say it out loud? That Iran having a nuclear weapon, just 1 does us all in, and we have hundreds. Israel has hundreds. Pakistan has them. India has them. Russia, China. I just don't understand how we got caught up in the idea that if they even got a nuclear weapon, somehow it would be pointed to every city in America and wipe us all out. That's just not the way it works. But we've got too many folks still in fear of that outcome. So I think President Trump, and so you ask, okay, had we started economically, would we have this inflation? Of course not. If we started economically, would we be further down the road in negotiations? Meaning, would we actually have a nuclear deal on the table had we started it with severe sanctions right out of the gate? Do business with Iran, we're going to tariff the snot out of you, and in fact, we're going to make sure you pay equally to what we're doing to Iran. Do you think the Strait of Hormuz would still be closed? Well, if it was, that would be now an instigation by them. And then you could maybe justify some kind of appearance, some kind of presence in the Middle East in the Strait while we're negotiating. And you would have the $2 billion a day back in your pocket. Gas would still be under $3. And maybe you would come to the conclusion that, okay, we've got to deal with Iran. They're not going to do a nuclear weapon. We're going to grant them economic sanction relief, and we're going to move on. And we're going to get back to the business of America, which is simple. We need Epstein files justice. We need work on inflation. We do need education reform. We need a health overhaul. We're not putting anywhere near the focus on MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, that movement. We're just about to get the flu vaccine in mRNA technology. That's Moderna. That's Trump's FDA voting 9-0 to give us that. And so we ask ourselves, isn't there anything else we could have done with the last 6 months, all that money, all that resources, energy, focus, and time, other than this now lost conflict in Iran? And the answer is, of course, anything. For $2 billion a day, we have new airports and bridges. For $2 billion a day, we have new mental institutions and prisons to put our homeless people in. We can build facilities to put these people in. How much money are our homeless people costing us each day as they destroy cities, as they go to the hospital that we pay for? They're on government subsidy. They're getting handouts. Don't you think for the $2 billion a day, we could have taken care of that problem? Boom, check, moving on. America no longer has the greatest homeless population in the world or drug addiction in the world. We have a closed border. We have good schooling. We have a plan for schools at least. Many things, but we chose this one. And we chose wrong. President Trump chose wrong. And he bet his entire legacy on the war in Iran. And you just wonder why. You wonder what was the convincing story that somebody brought to him. And of course, they try to feed him these lines about, well, they have an assassination attempt on your life too. So that kind of goes to the ego. They also probably told President Trump, you're going to do something that no president ever dared try. They didn't have the guts. They weren't bold enough. You're going to save the world from Iran having a nuclear weapon. And he took the bait. And he took the bait. And now he sounds pissed because he's threatening Oman, which was been the mediator between Tehran and Washington, D.C. They were working it out. Oman doesn't want a global conflict. They don't want to be wrapped up in this. They certainly don't want to be bombed by the United States, but Trump is so pissed. He is so frustrated. He wanted to end this thing day one, and he is 6 months into this war. And guess what, folks? There is no end in sight right now. That's the reality of where we're at. Iran's not going to give up. We're too prideful to give up. The unpopularity of destroying the entire country and watching some kind of refugee crisis go on in Iran is going to doom Republicans for decades. So he knows he has to be somewhat careful. He will be out of power again someday. Democrats will most likely resume control of the House in January, and he's going to have to deal with all this. So he's put himself in maybe the world's worst position going forward. But the economic sanctions are basically a stall tactic because we need to recoup military resources, need more missiles and ships, everything. We got to restock. And this can maybe buy that time. So then we would ask, okay, what are the odds that we've, killed the Ayatollah? We've made a whole mess of the region. And now we're going to sanction them to choke them off, starve the people, starve the government, starve the region. Does that really feel like that's going to be what gets us a deal? We've never tried the idea of saying we don't do business in the Middle East. We just don't care. That's an Islamic region. It has nothing to do with us. It's 7,000 miles away. So the only justification for us to still be in that region is Israel. And what does Israel want? They don't want economic sanctions on Iran. They want nuclear bombs dropped on Iran. They want them annihilated because the second that happens, they're the big dog in the region. And that's how you get greater Israel. And that's how they'll get Lebanon and Syria and Jordan. And they're going to take over that region. And there's nobody else there that can stop it. And we're giving that sort of a blessing. But we were coaxed into something that has the potential, empires end. And when you do stupid, foolish things like this, you can destroy a once great empire in a blink of an eye. And so we have to understand that we've done something, and war was not declared by Congress. This was neocons getting in the ear of Donald Trump, and he took the bait. And so we have to say, as Americans, hey, we love you, President Trump. We'd love to support you going forward, but we're totally opposed to this. We can't afford this, and our hearts aren't behind it. So get out. Stop now. And now what he's telling us is he'll never apologize. He says it just a little bitty tick up in your gasoline. 250 to 450 is not a little bit. That's double. Okay. $2 a gallon more times, I don't know, what do you do, fill up once a week? You have a 14-gallon tank, you're $30, you're throwing away, call it $120, $1,500 a month, a year, down the drain. Why? So that Israel could be the big daddy in the region. That's all it came down to. It does nothing for us. We weren't scared of Iran. They didn't have a nuclear weapon. What are we doing? Case closed. It's over. Leave. Get out. And he can't. And that's pride. And the Lord hates pride. He can't do anything with prideful people. He can do all things through the humble, and essentially has to shoo off the prideful. And if you've ever met a prideful person, and we're watching a prideful person, or been in business or dealt with it's an ugly character. It's not attractive. It's not something that you seek out. Give me somebody who's never made a mistake. Give me somebody who's never been wrong. Give me somebody that if I dare question them, I'm now the bad guy, right? So all of us MAGA people, back to 2015 to present, well, to the Epstein files disaster, and that's what started all this. See, without the Epstein files, you're not in Iran, and you know that. Even though Iran war was not President Trump's idea, it was always President Trump's idea to cover up the Epstein files. And so he was forced by federal law to release them. And that's his worst nightmare. We've talked at this at length. Of course, there's 3 million more files that he doesn't want us to see. Maybe it's just his friends, maybe it's him, but he doesn't want us to see them. He doesn't want anybody doing anything else further. And then remember, he says, you're still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? Yeah, we are. We're talking about Jeffrey Epstein and what he was doing to children, what he was doing to other politicians, those that he was snaring in, and we have names and you won't do anything about it. That's a major problem. That's a blight on America that we simply can't move past until we deal with. Okay, so President Trump was always intending to cover up the Epstein files. The Iran war sounded really, really good once the Epstein files were smacking the culture, smacking our face. They were out there. They got caught playing games with the redactions. Pam Bondi gave that disgraceful testimony talking about the Dow Jones $50,000 when they were asking about, why did you redact these names? Why did you not pursue these perpetrators? And she embarrassed herself and, of course, was fired because he knew she wasn't capable of keeping this up. And she wasn't. Todd Blanche is a Satan-led demonic lawyer, and he will go down with that ship all day, every night. And that's why he's going to need a big pardon. Don Jr. is going to need a big pardon. Eric Trump's going to need a big pardon. Pam Bondi, they're all going to need pardons because they all have a hand in this cover-up. And it's disgraceful as MAGA said, and MAGA has grandchildren. MAGA has kids. They don't seem to acknowledge the fact that these were somebody's kids and they were snatched away, taken to an island, taken to Mar-a-Lago, taken to New Mexico, raped, abused, tortured, eaten in some cases. Doesn't seem to bother them. Why? Why? Why would you be more into the Iran war than justice for the Epstein files? Doesn't that make it sound like your values are all over the place? Are you crazy? You're more scared of Iran getting a nuclear weapon than you are our elites eating, raping, killing, kidnapping our children? Really? Check yourself in the mirror if that's the way you feel today. This lie about it's a Democrat hoax, it's a made-up story, that's the made-up story. Are you telling me that there's 6 million made-up files that have been under, lock and key for so many years, and that we're playing all these games, going to all these for a hoax? Crazy? We can see the names. They have redactions on some. We can see that some guy sent Jeffrey an email that says, I loved the torture video. That doesn't bother you? That bothers you less than Iran having a nuclear weapon? You need to check yourself in the mirror, check yourself with the Lord Jesus Christ, and then maybe come back and say, you know what, we probably should deal with this at some point. These sound like pretty bad crimes. And they were. And it went on for a long, long time. And of course, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein is rearrested and then killed in prison. Case closed, Bill Barr. And of course, Bill Barr's dad hired Jeff Epstein at the girls' school in New York, in which he was later fired for fraternizing with the high school kids. He was a pervert then. He got middled all in there with Bear Stearns guys, high clients. That's how he eventually got to Lex Wexner, who he bilked for a ton of money. And participated in crimes with Lex Wexner. And then, of course, we know about just Staley, and we know about the long-term relationship with Bill Clinton and Bill Gates. And of course, they all deny it and regret it and all this stuff. We didn't follow up on any of that stuff. Hillary, come on. These are disgusting people, and MAGA doesn't even want to deal with them. And I think I know why MAGA doesn't want to deal with them, because if you peel back all the layers of the Epstein files, we're going to find Donald Trump has been lying to us this whole time. Did he rape a 3-year-old? Probably not. Does he know firsthand or witness that kind of stuff going on? Absolutely. Or else you wouldn't care. That's the most likely scenario. The other scenario is that Israel is the country that got him elected, $250 million from AIPAC. And they have a gun to the back of his head that says, hey, we got you in prison, or excuse me, we got you in office so that you didn't have to go to prison, and you're going to make damn sure these files never get out. Got it? The reality is that President Trump had to win the 2024 election or he was going to jail. And I'm not saying he should have gone to jail for any of those things. Stormy Daniels' case, who cares about that? The real estate stuff that they tried in New York, those are all BS, right? Because he was being taken advantage of, victimized, attacked by lawfare from the left, he gained an enormous amount of support from his already all-in supporters. They set up that staged assassination thing in Butler, and that sealed the deal. And AIPAC went with him. And part of that deal was, you're going to attack Iran, and don't you ever let the Epstein files make its way to a courtroom. Got it? And he said, absolutely. So he went from wanting to drain the swamp to joining the swamp. And so we have to realize when these guys switch teams on us, when they say this and do this, they're held to account immediately. And the Iran war is a great one to do. You said no new wars. They had no nuclear weapon. We're now in another forever war. And an economic war is even worse. There's no end in sight with that. It's the exact same place we started. They were already under economic sanction. There was already hostility. The two nations already hated each other. And all we did was piss them off, kill their president, the Ayatollah, and then we're going to pretend that now we're going to work out a deal. So they have to be wiped out or they have to be left alone. And of course, we'll never leave them alone. The war machine is asking for 1.5 trillion next year. And the baby boomer has been conditioned on war. They were part of Vietnam. They, of course, were the Cold War in the Russia 80s. Of course, 2001, we had 9/11. And we talked at the beginning of the show, although 9/11 was of unrighteous and false pretenses, and the ensuing war was all BS, we saw the images and we had, let's go get them. That was the rallying cry from most Americans. Democrats and Republicans said, go to Afghanistan and get Osama bin Laden. That's what we all felt, right? Shame on anyone, though, who still believes that Osama bin Laden had anything to do with 9/11, right? Osama bin Laden was a CIA asset, worked for us, and then they used him to set this crime up against. I mean, that's not over yet. I know it's 25 years ago, and I know they want us to shut up and pretend that Building 7 can just fall down like that. You got to be out of your mind. You got to be nuts to believe that story that a guy in a cave in Afghanistan took out 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York City, and they all fell free fall demolition style. I'm sorry, that's insulting my intelligence. It insults my intelligence when you tell me that mRNA COVID shots were made safe and effective in 9 months. Never hurt a fly, didn't stop transmission, now we know. Did hurt babies in the womb, now we know. Tony Fauci, thank you for that text messaging. Okay, those are lies that because we were so scared and caught in the moment, we'll take a shot, go to war. And that $2 trillion, that's a lot of your inflation. The $2 trillion that we wasted, the 20 years that we wasted, the 10,000 lives we lost, wasted, dealing with the 9/11 BS. Okay, we're still paying for that today. The Iran war, what we're dealing with today, that's baked in the economy for years and years to come. And that's if it ended today, and it's not ending today. And Iran knows that they're playing a longer game. They know it. They have a lot more support in their country to defend their country than we do in this country to continue the aggression. 30% approval for the war. Most people want us out now. They said if it's going to raise gas prices, we don't want to be a part of it. And then, of course, President Trump has a 33% approval rating. This is Biden stuff. And we were promised different. We were told in 2024, or felt like in 2024, the swamp's in trouble, that we're going to make right all the wrongs from the disastrous Joe Biden presidency. And boy, was he a piece of crap. Boy, was he a number. Opened that border, destroyed the Keystone Pipeline day one. He went all in on the LGBTQ. He flooded our schools. Now we have so many kids that are under this just trance, destructive, deadly ideology of LGBTQ, transgender. Remember, we're paying for kids to have sex changes. We're paying for our service members to have sex changes. A filthy president, a disgraceful president. But in 2024, of course, we thought, well, certainly President Trump has nothing to lose. He doesn't owe anybody anything. He'll never run for political office again. If he wins, he'll have slayed all of his political enemies. Watch out, swamp. He's coming for you. And it sounded really good for about 3 or 4 months. And then he switched teams. And then he became a part of the swamp. And now we sit in the filth of this swamp with an Epstein files cover-up, a Charlie Kirk murder cover-up, Iran never-ending war cover-up. Okay. And they're trying to tell us that this is still in our best interest and to just hold on there, because if you pay a little bit more for gas a little bit longer, you're stopping the #1 state sponsor of terror. Thank me later, I'm doing it. So we're paying for this. Everybody shell out a few $1,000s a year in inflation to cover his war, in which we receive no benefit. And how much you want to bet gas never gets back down to $2 from this point forward? In the history of this country, from now until the end of time, it blows up. It's never going back down to $2. We're now used to it. They've gotten us conditioned to it. To where if it came down to $3.50, we would be so ecstatic. Thank you so much for the extra breadcrumbs this week. That's what they would think. That's what we would feel, because we've been stretched and bent out of shape for so long by inflation. Can't buy a house. Healthcare's too much. Food is too much. Beef is too much. And now gas is too much, and it's not coming away. So we have a really critical time for America. It is Operation Never-Ending War once again here. War machine turned all the way on. We thought differently, but did we learn our lesson? I guess. For those of you that put your faith, your trust in a politician, have you learned your lesson? Whether that was Joe Biden and you thought he had all the answers, trans are going to finally be the focus, or the border, every immigrant is finally going to get the asylum wishes they desire. Okay, well, that hurts you. And for our MAGA people that are currently doing this, are you happy with the Epstein files cover-up? You see how much division and distaste this has caused in the mouth of conservatives. Half of conservatives believe that Donald Trump is in, or at least a part of, the cover-up of the Epstein files, which means you can't win any more elections if you're Republicans. Okay, you had to have all of them plus independents to get Donald Trump in 2024. Half of that crowd is gone, never to return, myself included. Okay, are you happy you did it? What would have been the shame? Because your hero might have been in there. Let me tell you something. If your hero is in the Epstein files, you should thank God that it was revealed to you and that you can stop worshiping politicians. You understand that? You should do us a favor and say, if my hero's so clean, prove it. And he can't. And they never will. He will need a pardon. His sons will need a pardon. Basically, the entire DOJ will need a pardon. Todd Blanche will need several pardons for what he's done. It's not good, folks. But the Lord is good. And I'd say this, do this until next time. Serve the Lord Jesus Christ. Tell a friend about him. Stay good. God bless everybody.
The Matthew Dark Show, your one-stop show for truth, courage, fellowship, and faith. Available everywhere you get your podcasts.